Attorney General came out a couple of days and said he doesn't believe there's systematic racism within police.
White people say, I'm not racist, I got black friends, you know what I mean? But when I go look at your Facebook, you just, with all white people, you just hanging out with them. No, I mean, you're racist, but you're not doing anything to kind of pop that little bubble.
I think a lot of the questions that people ask is like, it's the laws, right? It's the laws on our end, but how, like you said, like, how do you stop that law from happening if the laws never count? Shout out to that cop who got yammed on.
Ooh, I just saw that too.
George Floyd, man, that weight, that name just carries some emotions, man. It's touchy. It's a touchy subject, man. But usually when these things happen, I'm the only cop most people know, man. So when these things happen, it's like everybody asks me questions. They jump in the inbox like, "Yo, I need your thoughts on this." A lot of my posts kind of get controversial because it's raw and uncut, man. So I had the situation. So that situation, man, I think you'll find across America, man. Like everybody felt the weight of that one. You know what I mean? There's nobody. I haven't spoken with any law enforcement officer that has not, disagreed with those actions. I mean, there's been nobody across the board that I've came in contact with that really disagrees with how the officer handled that situation. I think it's complex. I think there's other things, other factors that weigh in that we got to talk about that sometimes we'll kind of tug at some of those emotional strings, like why did the officer stand by and do this?
That's the biggest question.
What I mean? It's the biggest question. I think most importantly, it could have been a situation that could have been resolved differently, but why did officers that were there, why didn't they act? You know what I mean? And it has to be an answer for that. You know what I mean? Whether we accept it or not, whether it's acceptable or not, it has to be some type of answer for that. And I think in that situation, I think a lot of them is just, and I don't want to make excuses for them, but I'm just thinking as far as a law enforcement, experience, a crowd being drawn around, those being young, newly recruited officers who really don't know how to, they know in a sense what they're given to in the academy, but what you learn in the academy, what you're exposed to is different when you get in the real world.
It's on the streets.
It's on different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What really happened prior to the incident that we didn't really see, as far that would have kind of elevated things as far as emotions. Because I can tell you right now, when you're in a heated situation and you got to go hands-on with somebody or you fight somebody, there's a lot of things that happen within your body that you really can't control. Things that, I don't know if you guys have heard the term auditory exclusion, which is your body kind of goes into this survival mode. It's crazy. And it's like extraterrestrial, bro. I'm telling you.
Really?
I've been, in situations where, you hear nothing but you hear yourself breathing. Your focus kind of pulls in.
Wow.
In a situation like that, a lot of times most people don't know this, but when you get in a high stress situation, even us, your blood starts to leave your extremities and go to the pool to the center of your body.
Yeah.
That way, in case you get cut, that's how you know. Sometimes you see somebody get shot, they won't necessarily be bleeding when they're shot until everything slows back down.
Wow.
So everything kind of tunes out. There's only certain things you hear. You may not hear. You might hear the sirens, but you might not hear somebody saying scream, or you might not hear somebody saying get up, or you might not hear that. You might not hear somebody say I can't breathe. You might only hear snippets of it because you're in this focused zone. Your body kind of goes into a survival mode. With that being said, it kind of goes back to training though. You got to expose yourself to a situation like that so you know how to get out of that. As a newly recruited officer may not know how to get out of that, but I've been in so many intense and rapidly evolving situations that I know how to train myself. If I work out, you know how much we work out together.
Yeah.
If we work out, working at an elevated heart rate, I've been exposed to that working out. So when I get into a situation where my heart rate elevates, I kind of know how to calm myself down.
It's a familiar place.
You know what I mean? It's a familiar place for me. But if you never train in that type of environment, in that type of arena, then you don't really know, man. So I think it's a situation that could have been resolved, man. It's no excuse to have an officer on somebody's neck for that long.
Yeah.
It's no excuse. The proper technique would have been on a shoulder blade, which is taught. I mean, because it's not going to obstruct airway. It's only to keep the person, if the person is moving around, jiggling. Even if he is in handcuffs, you still got to maintain some type of control over him. But that situation could have been stopped had those officers had some type of experience or training. Say, hey, look, and it's not like you got to be like, hey, man, you understand? It's just like, hey, man, shoot yourself. Come over this way. Yeah. You can do it in a way that's still, constructive to where it's not. But to just have them sitting there for that long, I mean, that just can't happen, bro.
Yeah, I look at it as, you made it similarities to military, and I think about football, and there's a hierarchy, right? And there's usually, from my recollection, he was the most experienced officer there. Sure. And if you're a newly recruit, how do you give direction to somebody that's hierarchy over you? And it's kind of like, you're paralyzed because it's like, hey, I haven't been in this situation, know what's right or wrong. I think that's wrong, but also I'm a subordinate to that officer at that particular time. And so it's almost like that blue line that we talk about, it's almost like, okay, how do we get people to come up to that blue line or cross it in that sense that it's just saying, hey, like you said, not go against the officer, but like, hey, get off his neck or let's do it this way.
Some kind of accountability.
Yeah,
some type of accountability because, like we said, unfortunately, I'm gonna be frank, there are some bad police.
Yeah.
I don't know if the majority or minority, I don't know, but how does the good police make sure that the bad police don't give the good police a bad name?
Because and let me watch, since we said we on this good police, bad police time, man. Like, it's one of those things, like, because people always say to me, man, you were one of the good guys, you're a good cop. And it's like, man, I get that kind of terminology and kind of that vibe.
I still arrest your ass.
You know what I mean? But I get that vibe. You know what I'm saying? Like, I get it. You know what I mean? Like, if I need to go hands on, I gotta do it. But it's all personal, man. I got 2 kids and a wife I'm trying to go home to today. But at the same time, I think it doesn't really boil down to good police and bad police. I think it boils down to good people and bad people. Where you at?
Very true.
Where's your heart?
True.
It doesn't matter. I can say you were a good doctor or a good teacher or a bad teacher or a bad barber. I mean, it goes down to I don't want to say barber because that involves skills. But you don't want a bad barber. But
hairline.
In the situation where you serve in the community, what type of person are you at deeply rooted? How do you view people in general? And there's a lot of things that really change over time as an officer. I could come in as a newly recruited officer and be like, look, I'm for the community. And then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 years in my career, I get shot by somebody.
Yeah.
Let's say I get shot by a black man. As a white officer get shot by a black man, where is his mind mentally? Where is his fear? It'd be the same way as if you were stopped by a white cop and you were brutalized. Every white cop you see,
it's trauma.
It's trauma. You know what I mean? So now you could also be thinking, well, dang, every black guy that I stop is going to shoot me because I've been shot by a black guy. So there's a lot of things that happen, internally that we really don't talk about. That the newly recruited officer coming in or the first year officer could be, brand new polished, uniform is sharp and clean. I mean, it's sharp, he's in shape, and all of a sudden, 15 years, he got a gut, he missing equipment, his boots are dirty. What's happened over his career? What has he dealt with internally? I mean, it's a lot of stuff you see, bro. I mean, there's a lot of things, and I don't want to be real and raw and uncut when I tell y'all. There's a lot of things that I hope you never have to see. There's a lot of things that I hope my kids never have to see and be exposed to, but I'm exposed to it every single day when I come to work because I'm dealing with tragedy. I'm not going to a call where it's like, this young man has graduated, or I'm going to a birthday party, somebody's been raped, somebody's been killed, somebody's had their house broken into. So I'm always dealing with tragedy. And the things that we don't really think about too is who helps the helpers at the end of the day? Because I'm exposed to that kid being shot. I'm exposed to that car wrecking and the 2 and 5-year-old burned up in the car. I got a 2 and a 5-year-old. So if I go to a scene and a 2 and a 5-year-old is wrecked and mom is on dope and she's wrapped the car around a tree, the kids are burning the back and they're screaming, and I can't get to them. What does that do to me internally? How does that really change my perception of life and that type of mental health that I need? Because I can tell you, there's a lot of calls that I play over and over and over again in my head. So that's something we'll talk about.
Going back, I know we brought up something that's kind of, because we don't get to hear from cops.
Right.
That we don't really have these sit-downs. And speaking from the community, there's that blue line and the accountability thing. What do you think the reason is for the law enforcement when you see a George Floyd situation and you see the cops stand by, and then after the situation exposes, and you still see some cops that may defend or stand by the actions of the cops? What is it that what is the reason behind that?
That blue line gets brought up a lot. I mean, that's the emblem that we talk about, the thin blue line. And really, what it really means is that blue line is supposed to represent us standing in between good and evil is what that's supposed to stand. It's not necessarily supposed to say, here's the blue line, nobody can cross it. It's only us. It's just a divide that's supposed to come in between the good and evil. That's all the blue line is. But I think what it boils down to, man, I think a lot of times it's fear of scrutiny. A lot of people are scared. A lot of officers are scared to have this conversation because they don't know how it's going to be taken. Somebody might take a conversation and say, oh, well, look what this officer said. So you got to be real strategic about what you say and real tactful in the words that you use, because somebody can take, as we know, we always have a First Amendment right to say what we want, but there's a certain way that you have to say it because you are representing another entity. You're not just representing yourself.
Right.
So I think that's what boils into. I think some people are just afraid. Some people don't want to say anything positive or negative because of the backlash that they may get from it, whether it's they're for or maybe they're against. Some people just may remain silent. You know, but then again, is that always bad that you just remain silent? Would you rather somebody open their mouth and say something crazy, or would you rather just say, you know what, I'm just not going to comment? So we don't want everybody talking. That's it. We don't want everybody talking. But
we don't want this president talking. You can say
that's off the wall, bro.
Right? Yeah, that's true. But my thing with it, so you know, I've seen, let's say William Barr, Attorney General, came out a couple of days and said he doesn't believe there's systematic racism within police. Now I don't know how systematic it is, but racism, as far as what I've seen, it has invaded almost every piece of society. From your standpoint, could you rationalize how people may feel that there is racism within some police department? When it comes to those bad people,
right?
I think, you know, there's bad people for a lot of different reasons, but just knowing the history of how police started in this country, is there still a remnant? Because that's what I feel. I feel that, you know, there's a remnant that's left over. Is the reason why, you know me, I've never been like a thug or any type of that stuff, but there's a reason why I may walk around and then somebody may be like, hey, you're a suspect doing this. And I'm like, I don't even present like that.
Right.
Is it, why am I presenting like that? Is it because I'm black, you know? And where does that stem from?
I mean, I think that it goes back to just goes back to the world in general, man. Like how black people were viewed anyway. You know, it goes back to slavery and how we were viewed. It goes back to all of that. You know, it goes back to crime. It goes back to the civil rights movements, and it goes back to the Black Panther Party. It goes back to all of that. You know what I mean? So it's those type of things are generationally embedded into just our DNA. A lot of people, it's just that way. You know what I mean? So a lot of people who will say, you'll hear, like for instance, hear a lot of white people say, I'm not racist, I got black friends. You know what I mean? But when I go and look at your Facebook, we're all white people, you just hanging out with all. No, I mean you're racist, but you're not doing anything to kind of pop that little bubble. Same thing for black folks. I ain't racist, you know. Same thing. You look at your post and it's just like you got all black people in your. So what are you doing to really kind of
bridge,
you know
right?
I call myself kind of blessed or lucky in the end because being in an interracial marriage, like my kids are mixed, so it's just like I get to see both sides of the spectrum. I don't have to worry about it just being just black or being just right. So just white. So I kind of luck down that end, I would say.
You know, and that's a really good question. I didn't know you had interracial kids. That's amazing. I love that. So when we all talk about when we grow up, and Daniel LC this here is that our parents talk to us like, hey, as a black child, so you as being a cop, do you have that conversation?
I mean, I do, man. There's a lot of things with my kids, man, like that I have to really, that I gotta really filter out, or I gotta make sure I'm saying the right things because my kids will say, like, they know when I come to work, like, they know the difference between two uniforms. If I'm in, my regular uniform, I'm going to work. If I'm in another uniform, there's a BDU tactical style thing, being on SWAT, they know it's something elevated. So my 5-year-old, she might see me in my tactical and be like, oh, Daddy, you want to get the real bad guys. Like, I'm just like, baby, everybody's not bad. I got to really kind of filter it how she sees it because it's real black and white to her, man. So, she sees the gun, she's like, what's the gun for? Is that what you shoot bad guys with? I'm like, no, it's just to protect Daddy so I can come home. You know what I mean? So it's things I got to kind of rearrange with them, man. They're luckily they're young enough that I don't really have to have that conversation of, here's what you need to do if you get stopped. Eventually there's going to come a point, because they got little caramel skin. It's going to come to a point.
Is that a fear for you with you being in law?
Not necessarily a fear, man. I don't think it's really a fear for me. But I also understand why it's a fear for a lot of parents who are raising 100% black kids. So I understand the fear of it and having the fear to have the conversation. It's not necessarily a fear for me. I think it's just going to come down to how I want to raise my kids and how I want them to see the world. You know what I mean? I think at the end of the day, if I raise them to be respectful, they could come into a cop that's disrespectful. But as long as I'm saying, look, do everything that you need to do to go home. And that's the biggest thing I would tell for anybody. When you get stopped, when I get stopped, when I'm driving my personal car and a cop get behind me, I'm like, oh, let me tighten up. Seatbelt on, make sure my phone down, make sure I'm 10 and 2. You know what I mean? It's just that it makes you perk up a little bit, you know what I mean? It's not always a bad one, like, hey, the bad guy's behind me, but it's like, let me make sure I'm doing everything right. That's what law and order at the end of the day is going to stand for. You don't want to get stopped. I ain't scared because I'm going to get shot. I don't want to get a ticket. I want to make sure I'm not, speeding. But for somebody else, it may be, man, if this dude stopped me, he might, it's a different experience. I've never had that experience with law. himself.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. I tell my people, like, I'm not a big fearful person, but right now I'm terrified of getting stopped by a police officer.
Wow, man.
No, like,
Really?
extremely terrified.
I've personally, back in the day, I've had a cop draw his weapon on me from him being frustrated. So for me, it's
He's
like,
from Roxborough now.
No, but this happened when I was in college.
Oh, okay.
When I was in college. But for me, it's just like me doing this, I've never talked to, like after that, I was just like, I'm done with cops.
Right.
In my mind, all cops are bad. But I think it's important for us to do this because it's not that way.
Right.
You run into a bad cop. And then the thing that made it worse was his partner was there and he didn't check him. So in my mind, I'm like, he's doing this, he obviously thinks it's okay. So in my mind, it's that all cops are bad type mindset. But then when you really look into it, you realize there is, like you said, there is cops that they want to say something, but it's that fear. It's like, what's going to happen when I do say something? I understand that you got a job, you still got to feed your family, but for me, at the end of the day, and it might just come from my faith base, me believing in Jesus. I can't see like Marshall, this is my boy, but I can't see anything if he was doing something that's still out of line that I wouldn't check him.
Right, and there's a lot of people because if there's a situation if I was involved in another officer and he was just going on, I'm like, hey, chill, bro. You know what I mean? There's a lot of cops that do that. I've been checked before. I've been checked by white officers and say, hey, Sharp, pipe down. I'm like, all right, say no more. But you need that. You need that accountability. Say, hey, and it's not necessarily, hey, you need to be quiet, stop. It's just like, hey, man, I got it. And just that's how you got to step in. It doesn't have to be where it's like overly, you're angry, y'all are going at it because you don't want that. I don't want to be arguing with another officer on scene about this, what's going on. Let's take care of it. Let's solve it. Let me step in and take over. And then after we can address it. Hey, man, I don't like the way you took, he might say, I don't like the way you stepped in on that point. And I might say, well, this is the reason why I stepped in. I'm trying to protect you from this and the third. This is how we should do things. We got to think about the image of us, as officers, the agency, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of officers that will check other officers. It happens all the time. I mean, look across the globe. You may not see it as much because the media's only going to portray a certain point. There are a lot of officers getting fired. Over minimal stuff. I mean, and it's happening. So that accountability that we don't think is happening, it's happening. A lot of times it just doesn't get reported.
Why do you think it's done on such a low, I'm not going to say low scale, because like you said, a lot of it doesn't get reported. But from the eyes of the public, why do you think it's seen as more of on a lower scale?
Because the media, man, sometimes I got to be careful about how I say things. I think the media can portray a lot of good, but
it's an agenda.
It's an agenda. You know what I mean? There's an agenda that they have to push. If you were saying, look, I got this photo, I got this time, or I got this story, I got to bring it to you. It's going to be the next George Floyd. It's going to be the next Brianna Taylor. It's going to be the next Mike Brown. And so if it's not high profile and it's not going to get the hits, it's not going to get the reviews, it's not going to be repeated over in the media, it's not going to get addressed. You might have that cop that, got arrested for DWI, or got arrested for, beating his wife, or got arrested for he said something racist on Facebook. That story might read for a day or two, and it's gonna be gone. So it's low level. You know what I mean? It's not high profile, but that stuff is happening all over the country. Cops are getting suspended. They're getting fired for misconduct. There are sheriffs and police chiefs and captains and majors or supervisors that are checking their officers and writing them up. I'm a supervisor at my agency, and I can tell you right now, there's been people that I had to check and have to put paper on because they're not doing what's necessary.
Shout out to my man being a supervisor for the good cops, man. That means that you have control over maybe, curtailing some behavior. That's amazing, man. Yeah, I see it as I'm a firm believer that there's always a solution. Right. And I'm not here to push a narrative. I want truth.
Absolutely.
And I'm the type, like you said, I think maybe it comes from my football nature when we say keep your head on the swivel. You'll knock somebody out one play, the next play you get knocked out.
Yes, sir.
And it's always that balance, right? And so I take that balance into life and saying like, hey, like he said, if I'm out of line, check it. Or, iron sharpens iron. That's how we should move. It's just that, for instance, the old man, right? The old man gets pushed down by the SWAT team, busts his head up, and then we see the other police try to run back and help him up, and that police tells him, no, don't help him.
Right. And then they don't. Right.
And then now the guy has, brain damage or something? So I look at it as, that's it kind of, that clip is so important because that shows I don't want to say good cop, bad cop, but it shows the human side that one cop pushed him down, which made, to the lame term, we say the bad cop or the bad person.
Right.
and then the other good person that wasn't involved with it tries to help the old man, and then the bad person actually wins by telling the good person not to help him.
Right.
So it's almost like you saw like good versus evil, or good versus bad, and bad actually win with converting that good person back in line to bad.
And the thing is, I think that's perception. Perception is reality.
Yeah.
We see that and we think that may have happened. That's what we think happened. That's the feeling we get when we see it. But is there really something deeper that happened there? You know, because I can tell you, being on a tactical team, if that's a situation when you do have to use force on somebody and you're a part of that line, you keep moving forward. There is the people in the back will come up and provide aid, but at a certain point, you're holding that front line on a riot squad.
Because that puts you in danger.
Because it puts you in danger
by,
and exposes the integrity of whatever muscle line that you created. If there's a line of officers that are moving to push the street, and we got one officer break a line, which I get it, he wants to
help. Kind of like the Greek shield.
Yeah, it's like a shield. Exactly. Those are the tactics.
Yep.
And a lot of, like I said, it goes back to being paramilitary. A lot of times they're brutal. Violence is not pretty. No matter how we see it. Is there different techniques that we wish that the officers could have used, and instead of pushing the old man? Yeah, why is the old man running up on the cops? I mean, there's a lot of questions that you got to ask, and why do officers do these certain things? I don't think the officer was really necessarily telling him, like, no, don't help him. It was, no, you keep, I think that guy was the leader of that muscle line and was saying, no, you keep your line. Somebody else behind us is going to come provide medical.
Gotcha.
And I didn't really see too much after that clip. I saw the initial clip, and then they kind of cut off. So I don't know what type of medical attention that they were able to provide behind. But those are the tactics that are taught. And those are things that we're not going to know if we don't have this conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very much.
That's what we're saying.
Right. That's
So
true.
I can't leave her out, but Breonna Taylor.
Man,
Well,
I need.
can you explain that? Can you explain that
I can
situation?
explain this situation, man. I've actually been reading up on.
Yes, people
anything.
have. I would say this: people read the case.
Yeah, you got to read the case.
Read the case, because I read the case and I understood a little bit more, but there's still some
There's a lot of
differences I still have.
So
but-
it's touchy,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
It's touchy, man. I think even a lot of these situations I talked about, man, whether it's justified or unjustified, it's still a loss at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still a loss at the end of the day, man. Somebody lost a sister. Somebody lost,
But
somebody
I think that a lot of the questions that people ask is like, yeah, it's a loss, right? It's a loss on our end, but how, like you said, like, how do you stop that loss from happening if the loss is never accounted for?
Yeah.
Right. I
And
see what you're
that's
saying.
that's
Because
what
I think
we're scared
that's
of.
the biggest issue. In our side, we don't see the accountability.
Right.
being
So,
there.
Breonna Taylor, whenever these high-profile cases come out, it's people are quick to just say, "Oh," and jump in on it. You know what I mean?
People want to say F-12
People
for
wanna,
any
they want
reason.
for any reason. You want to jump
They
in?
say it in the rap videos for no reason.
Right.
That's true.
But if we think about it this way, man, if you were in a relationship with your significant other, and y'all are having, I've been in a situation where me and my wife are having a heated debate where we just don't really agree. But if I don't take a time and say, you know what, I'm not ready to have this conversation right now. Let me calm down. Let me gather my thoughts, and then let's have it tomorrow. Let's have it, in the next 30 minutes. If not, I'm gonna say something I really regret or I don't have any knowledge of based upon how I felt. What she said hit me emotionally, so I'm responding based upon that emotion.
Emotional
Instead of
versus
really,
logical.
instead of just saying, all right, it's okay to feel that emotion. It's okay to be upset when you see, a situation like Brianna Taylor when she gets killed. You see cops shoot somebody. It's okay to feel a certain way. That's cops that shoot people that cry after because they feel bad about it. So it's okay to feel that way. I don't want to take that emotion away from anybody, but at the same time, we got to also provide that logic into it. So read the case, read the facts of the case. I think this is very complex. It's tragic. When we first heard it, it was, hey, they hit the wrong house. Everybody said it was the wrong house. She was this, she was asleep. They said that she was, I don't know what her background is.
I think it was a nurse.
A nurse and all that.
Yeah.
You start seeing conflicting stories about what really happened, but that's just the media putting out only a little bit, putting out a narrative to fit that certain agenda. This happened before George Floyd. No, a lot of people don't know that. This happened
that's
right
right.
George Floyd. So it wasn't. If George Floyd didn't happen, we'd still be hearing about Breonna Taylor. So it's a deep case, man. I think what I've read from the facts of the case is that it was a narcotic search warrant.
Yeah.
A lot of people said the officers did a no-knock search warrant. Well, you can get a no-knock
That's
search
legal.
warrant from a judge. You can do it, and they got it. So they're there because they conducted surveillance based upon seeing her boyfriend come in and out. They saw him leaving with drugs. They saw him going they saw this drug activity going back and forth. Now, I'm not here to muster up Breonna Taylor's name and say what she was involved with or what she had knowledge of, because I don't know that. But we know that this guy that she was dealing with, her boyfriend, was, in drugs. He was a drug dealer, a drug trafficker. That's what he's being charged with. They had the evidence to back that, which just means they had the evidence to go to a magistrate or a judge to apply for the search warrant based upon the facts that they've already developed. So they were there for a reason. They were there lawfully, justly, rightfully so, if they're there because either they followed him there or they knew this was one place that he would hone or store drugs. So they get there. I think even because they apply for no knock based upon the nature that there could be weapons. I mean, we know drugs, guns,
it's a mix.
It's a mix, you know what I mean? So they applied for it. They were approved of it. They still, even though they had a no-knock search warrant, they still knocked and announced, and they still announced themselves as police. If you look at the reports, it says that they still knocked and announced. After that, they knock, because, and the reason they changed it, because they feel like they developed new information that she was there alone. So they were going to have a different approach and allow her to come to the door. But it was taking so long. Word is that her boyfriend says they were upstairs watching a movie. They didn't hear it. You know, were they upstairs asleep? Or were they up there destroying the drugs before the cops get there? You just don't know. I don't know that, and I'm not going to assume that that's what happened, but we don't know that. What was going on to take place? Why they didn't come to the door at a certain time? So the cops are knocking, police. They don't hear anybody. Eventually, they breach. Right. Now, his side of the story is he never heard it. He came downstairs to get his gun. They kept saying, who is this? Who is this? All of a sudden, the door flew open because they breached it. Once the door got breached, he was in the hallway. It says that they were in the hallway together. I don't know if she was in the room and came out or where she was, behind them or in front of him. He sees the door fly open. He shoots. He shoots one bullet. He hits the cop in the femoral artery. He goes down. Second, either I think the initial cop got hit, returned. He fired 6 shots. I don't know how many. It was 20 shots total that was fired. I don't know how many. We got to count for the officers that shot outside. I think he shot 10 rounds outside. So you got 10 outside that he shot. 6 that the officer said he shot. The officer got hit. So that only leads me to believe there's going to be 4 additional rounds that the officer that was behind him that was either dragging him out the doorway shot. After that, they both lay down on the floor. He ended up calling the police. In a situation like that, an attackable situation, if the officers, I can tell you right now, based upon training, based upon what I've been exposed to, the type of training I've been in, if we take rounds right there at the front door, we're not going to continue to push in. You're going to step back and pull your guy out and go back, and you're going to share everything up and just develop a perimeter. And that's what happened, which goes along to the fact that why did she get the man up? She was alive 5-6 minutes because they had pulled out and was trying to call this guy out. We don't know how long he was on. He got on the phone, called 911. So what was he doing in the house? Time goes. It's not like this thing is, these things get drawn out. So 5 to 6 minutes go by. However they said she was alive, 5 to 6 minutes. He's in there on the phone saying, I've been shot. They don't know where his gun is. They got to call him out of the house. They eventually call him back out. And by the time they call him out, when they go in there to clear, she's in there dead. So we know for a fact that there's 3 officers involved. The sergeant that got shot, the officer behind him, and then the officer that was shooting outside the window, who I'm assuming was on the perimeter. He shot rounds into the top window, back patio. He's been fired. That's unacceptable. You can't account for it. Now, there's no evidence to say that those rounds hit Breonna. So we can't really, we can't really charge him for murder.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? We can't charge, because we don't know if those rounds hit her. But he has been fired because that was against their policy, their deadly force policy. You can't just blindly shoot. You can't do that and shoot into a window and obstruction when you don't know what's on the other side of it. I think a couple rounds hit some neighboring house where the kids were at. So he's been fired. We know that. So then we got to focus our attention back onto the 2 officers that are involved in it. Now, painting that picture, looking at it from the outside, we're looking at this at a bird's eye view, trying to replay the situation. Was it a situation where they were just recklessly shooting? Or was it a situation where he shot, officer got hit, and you stepped in and you start shooting because you took fire and your officer got shot? That's something I'm probably going to do. If my officer gets hit and I go behind him, he's down, I got to lay some type of fire, not necessarily just spraying, but some type of cover fire to make sure we can get him out. Now, was Brianna in the hallway? Where were they standing? Did she come out of the room as the shooting was taking place? Did he use her as a shield? Those are things that we don't know.
See, I think that's the tricky part, right? Mm-hmm. Because when it goes to being honest, right? So we got honest situations that may happen that, for lack of better judgment, or lack of better whatever, cops are justified, right? But the issue is, I think, the distrust, because there's plenty of times that things have happened. And because, from what I told the first cop on the scene, writes a report. They write the report, and that's what everyone sees and goes off of, but that's not really what happened. Right. Where there's sometimes that is really what happened. And that's where the disconnect comes. It's like, okay, well, we have a history where cops said that I had this much amount of drugs on me, and you know you did, and you know that they planted it. But the report says you had it. Right. And your history has you have it. So it's almost like there's maybe a sense that we are being targeted, especially people that they may know already have a history. It's like, oh man, because we talk about how do you rise? as a police officer. It's arrest. It's things like that. So it's not okay.
Yeah,
so
that's we can get it. If you want to get into the
I do.
Brianna, that's definitely. I don't want to cut you off on
Yeah.
the Brianna situation, but because I want to wrap it up because I know we can talk about that forever.
Yeah.
But it's still tragic. You know, I would say that it's still tragic, man. If she got shot, it's that had to happen. I don't think people are saying, you know, FBI's programmed now, so
Yeah.
I think everybody's a little upset. It's been 4 months. But I almost appreciate the fact that it's taking 4 months and not that it's super quick. One, because it gives them time to comb over the evidence, the case, the files, whatever evidence, the interviews. It gives them more time versus rushing the judgment. We saw that in Baltimore where they just rushed the charge. And we know a lot of time, and I think that's what we'll see in Atlanta too with Rashard Brooks.
Yeah.
That DA rushing a charge and overcharge is probably going to come back in the end and bite them because they're rushing to do that because of public scrutiny. He's up for DA next. He got a high profile case. I gotta land these votes. I gotta get some charges pressed. When sometimes situations may not warrant those charges, but you did it just because out of public scrutiny.
I think I'm 100% on board. I think where public we sit is that we're not necessarily asking for them to get charged. Because if I shot somebody, I would be locked up before I got. And that's what we see is that if you shoot somebody as a police officer, we want your day in court. We want you to get vindicated, but you're able to walk.
Yeah. But see, the other thing is though, and that's what we talked about when we had a situation about that qualified immunity, things that they should be exposed to.
Yeah.
As an officer, me as a civilian, if I'm out of uniform and I'm not in my jurisdiction, I got the same as you. Me and you on the same place. If I'm in Durham, I got jurisdiction here. But if let's say I go to Raleigh or I go to Cary, I'm just a civilian. I'm not, I'm an officer in Durham, but I don't have jurisdiction there. So. What I can do is not the same as what I can do in Durham. It's a little different, but being that, where you work or if you're doing things as an officer, I think you are going to be exposed to some type of qualified immunity. In a sense, I feel like you should. Whether it needs to be combed over and revamped, cool. Yeah. But there's going to be things that I might be exposed to, or I might have this, I don't want to say ability, but that I'm going to be exposed to that you're not.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? You're not going to be exposed to that going to a person, mental call, he's willing to act coming at you. You're not going to be exposed to that.
Yeah.
Am I supposed to run around the car from him for 15 minutes or do I hold my ground and shoot him? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So as a civilian, what are you going to do? I mean, your rights would be to smoke just like my rights would be to smoke. Yeah. So it's different. You see a guy in the store, you may not know this, but you see a guy in the store robbing it, you're concealed carry. He got his gun out, pointing the gun at this clerk. You can smoke him just as a cop could. But then again, there could be other situations where you may not be justified on. You know what I mean? Where
And I think those are the situations that hurt it for all situations. Because when you look at the unjustified, some because some police killings have like when you look at Flando, when a guy asked him, "Can I get your license?" He tells him, "I have a gun here."
Right.
And he reaches for his license, cop heard a gun, so he just starts shooting.
Right.
And I think when you look at those cases and there is no consequences for the cop, that right there is a precedent that you just take into all cases.
Right.
And I think that's what hurts it. Because sometimes some people do act out to where police force does need to be had. But when you look at situations where you look at Flando, or you look at somebody who's unarmed, when you look at Tamir Rice, little kid playing with a toy gun in the park. Right. When you look at those situations, I think those are the situations that hurt because a lot of those cops don't get charged. Right. They won't.
And the thing is there, and I go back to this, man. I think you guys will really appreciate this. There's a thing, there's a moral and ethical standard, and then there's law. You know what I mean? I could be, for instance, Tamir Rice. I could be justified in shooting a kid. I could be totally justified. I get a call that he's walking in the park with a gun. I don't know if I get out, he's gonna shoot me or not. I could be justified in doing it. And it can be justifiable by law, but is it morally and ethically
that's why I
right?
think that line is blurred so
That's
much.
a very good point.
And it's key though, because it's like I've been in a situation. I can tell you this.
That's what goes to the good person.
It goes back to the good person.
Is there a way to change that it'll be beneficial
Pay
for
him
$80,000?
We get good people.
Because I get what you're saying. Like if you hear somebody has a gun somewhere,
you
do go on high alert.
Yeah.
But I think it's also to where you have to understand, which I think is hard to do as a cop. You have to understand you're a cop, and you did sign up to go in situations like that, to where you have to remember, let me assess it before I just get out and go guns.
Well, the thing too, though, is you also have to account. This is things that we got to talk about too that a lot of people don't understand is that you get a split second to make a decision, bro.
That's true.
You get a split second, life or death. You get a split second to make a decision. And there's no amount of training, there's no amount of any of that's gonna happen. Because when it happens, I mean, I might be a cop and I might see somebody shooting. Or there's been a situation where I go to a house for an alarm call and the Rottweiler come busting out the door and I could just have my mouse training, roll and shoot him and everything. I'm like, that's like my patrol car, like, hey, somebody come get this dog.
Yeah.
So it's a lot we say what we do when we're in these situations, but if you've never been exposed to it, man, it's tough. Like I was in a situation where this guy did get out of the car with a gun. He had a Glock with a, they call it an extendo.
Yeah.
They call it an extendo, and it was in his hand. I would have been justified from shooting, but it was just a split second of me saying, is this guy making a threat towards me or is he not? You know what I mean? In that split second of me deciding and me pulling slack on the trigger, he dropped it. And thankfully I don't never want to have to kill somebody, man. Am I prepared to do it? Absolutely, because I got to go home and I got to protect you. I got to protect you. I got to protect my family. I got to protect my other officers. But do I necessarily want to do it? No. In that split second that I took, he dropped the gun. But on the other side of the spectrum, that split second of me hesitating could have been him turning and shooting. So
that's that, and I think you also made a good point and I think this is something good for the community to understand. When you talk about police training, because when we look at it from our side, when we do our research and what gets shown to us is a lot of police training isn't on de-escalate. It's on combat and being physical, and it's more of like combat training that you would get in the military.
Right.
And I feel like from my end, they say, like I said, because I've never been through police training, so that's why I want to ask you this. They say a lot of police training isn't on communication and de-escalation of things. Can you speak on those into police training?
I would say that that would be false in a sense. It would be really, really false. I think a lot of it does involve combatives and defensive training and physical training because you got to be physically fit for your job. You have to be. But there is a large majority of police training that is community oriented. It's all and it has changed over the years. As we deal with these things, the last 5 years we've seen there's new blocks. I'm an instructor, so I teach in the academy, and we see new blocks every year to get and it's more de-escalating the police, dealing with victims in the public, dealing with people in color, dealing with the youth. We start to see more of that training come in. But there's also outside training that you don't get. You might get your normal 700 hours of training in the academy, but you gotta get there's training you get every year. Your annual training that you get, and then there's extra training. So I can go to other places. I can go to other places and get extra training. So it's not just about it's combat. It is because that's a big part of it. There's there's emotional intelligence part of it. How to deal with people and in the verbal contact. So yeah, it's definitely a thing.
Well, I definitely understand, and I got a greater education. I thank you for that. It's a complex job, and it's a lot of people say what they would do, and just even in football, being in situations where all of a sudden you feel like I'm here and then I'm not.
Yeah.
And you don't know how to react. So I definitely get that, and I thank you so much for being a person willing to educate us on that side in the community. But the final words I want to just ask. So what's next?
Yeah. And what's next is we continue to push, man. We continue to have hard conversations like this, and we just we jot these notes down. We go back and we watch these videos like game film, bro. We just keep watching. We just keep watching, keep growing, keep learning. I think there's a lot of positive going on in the community right now, especially I'm real big on this Safe Zone Friday, Coach Keenan, guys like LC that participate on every. I was lucky to just get in with those guys, man. We do it every Friday. Speaking of which,
I was going to say, speak on that a little bit.
I gotta speak on that a little bit, man. It's been super dope being a part of that, man. Coach Keenan,
what it is.
So it kind of came up, man. It's something that Nolan Smith, D Rose, a lot of those guys in the community were already doing, and I hit Chris up because I had this feeling, man. I think I'm a follower of Jesus too, man. So it's something. Sometimes you just connect, man. God just makes a plan for all of us, and I just had this feeling. It was after the 12-year-old got shot. And I said, man, we gotta do something. I told Chris, we gotta do something. We gotta stop being so afraid and getting on social media, man, social media wars and typing about what we're gonna do. We gotta put feet on the ground, and we gotta get in these neighborhoods. Let's cook for these kids. Let's serve them. Let's show them that we are people. You could be a teacher, you could be a doctor, you could be a coach, you could be a cop, you could be an ex-gang member, whoever you are. We always have something to offer, and so we want to pull everybody in that has some type to offer to the youth and teach them to grow, man. So the Safe Zone has been super key, man. I've been tasked with kind of bringing the first responders in, so bringing law enforcement, bringing EMS, bringing fire, and kind of speaking on their behalf. I mean, last week was great. We had the sheriff there, we had the mayor there, so it's growing every week, man. So we're starting to see more people come in. We're gonna be in Oxford Manor this Friday. So
Oxford Manor this Friday. What time?
It's gonna be 4:30. It's usually 4:37 is the time that we're normally out there. So if you can pull up, we got gloves, we got masks. We listen to Roy Cooper. We ain't trying to disrespect that. We got gloves, we got masks. You can serve and scoop macaroni and cheese, baked beans, serve hot dogs. You can come out there and just play with the kids and talk to the community, man. So we love to have them grow. It's part 4 or 5, so we got one more date. And we hope to see this thing grow, man. So we just saw we're giving back.
That's beautiful.
Well, we appreciate it, brother.
Absolutely,
Thank you much for the time.
Absolutely, man.
Thank
Salute to y'all boys, man. Thank you.
Sure.